So let's talk about M3GAN. This is a horror comedy. A robotics engineer at a toy company played by Allison Williams from Girls, from Get Out, builds a lifelike doll that begins to take on a life of its own. M3GAN, which is stylized as M3GAN, stands for Model 3 Generative Android. It's directed by Gerard Johnstone, who doesn't have any credits that I recognize. I think he has like 4 or 5 other credits. I think they're mostly TV or shorts. Screenplay is by Akela Cooper, who co-wrote Malignant and has writing credits for Grimm, TV series like Grimm the 100, American Horror Story, and Luke Cage. Stories by Akela Cooper and James Wan, who is known for, this guy's like a horror aficionado, connoisseur. Annabelle, The Nun, a couple of movies, installments of the Saw franchise, Aquaman, which is not horror, but could use some horror elements to make it different. Malignant, which he co-wrote with Akela Cooper, and then one of the Conjuring movies. Produced by Blumhouse Productions, that have become kind of like the top production company when it comes to horror, I would say. Atomic Monster Productions and Divide Conquer is distributed by Universal Pictures and released on January 6th in theaters. And then it hit streaming this past week. Yeah, end of February. Running time of 102 minutes, which is like perfect. Not too long, not too short. Had a budget of $12 million and made almost $175 million at the box office. I was about to say $200 million, but it was like, this kind of feels like a lie, like a big major lie. I don't want to lie to you, not to your face. The cast, as I mentioned, Allison Williams as Gemma. She plays the engineer who works at the high-tech toy company in Seattle called Funky. And she has a niece named Katie. And Katie is the 8-year-old girl who lost her parents in a tragic snow plow accident, where like I believe that was the opening scene where she's playing on her iPad. The way this movie opens, we'll get to it, was so clever and fun and funny. And it's like that's where, or if we're comparing M3GAN to Cocaine Bear, like that's M3GAN, you win that round. Because the opening scene, even though the opening scene in Cocaine Bear with the drug smuggler, and Matthew Reese, whatever, like that was good and kind of set the tone, was nice. This one, the commercial that they open with in M3GAN is just like, all right. I immediately was like, I think I'm going to like this movie. As soon as that commercial came on, I was like, all right, I know I'm going to like this movie. Violet McGraw plays Katie, the 8-year-old niece of Gemma. Ronnie Chang, who is a stand-up comedian, and I've seen clips of, I don't think I've ever seen his full special, but I've seen clips. He's a pretty funny dude. Plays David, Gemma's boss at Funky. Amy Donald is the body, the actor in the body of M3GAN. And then Jenna Davis is the voice of M3GAN. Brian Jordan Alvarez as Cole, Gemma's lab partner. Jen Van Epps as Tess, Gemma's lab partner. Stephanie Garneau-Montagne as Stefan, Stephane? Looks like Stephanie. Again, I'm old and white. What do you want? So Kurt plays Kurt, David's assistant. Lori Dungy as Celia, the next door neighbor with the annoying dog, kind of a vicious dog. Amy Usherwood as Lydia, the therapist, who I guess either Gemma hired or Katie's grandparents hire to see if Gemma is an actual fit, like suitable to be a parent or a legal guardian to Katie. Then we can talk about the plot. That opening scene with the commercial, it's a fake, like not a real commercial, but a commercial for this companion, this little furry pet, almost like a Furby. Remember Furbies? Kind of looks like a Furby a little bit, but it way more technologically advanced high-tech toy that, comes with an app. And so Katie's playing with the iPad that has that app for, I guess it's, what's it called? Something Pet, Forever Pet, but it's like FUR, Ever Pet, because like, it's just like the lyrics in the song of the commercial are funny. Like, we'll live longer than you once you've died and gone to heaven. Like, it's just like, that right there is hilarious. And so I was like, oh, this, like, because I saw this after Cocaine Bear. I streamed it on Peacock. And as soon as that played, I was like, I know for a fact that this is going to be better than Cocaine Bear. Like, funnier for sure, because this is already funnier. Like, this commercial alone is good. It gave me kind of RoboCop vibes. the original RoboCop, because the original RoboCop, they had those little vignettes or commercials or parodies where it's like, I'd buy that for $1, like that kind of vibe and feeling to it. So I appreciated that, and I like that a lot. She's playing with this this toy where you can feed it virtually, and then it will actually fart and burp and like actually poop at one point. I think it does. And so the mother and the father's driving, her mother's in the passenger seat. And I can't tell you how close this hit to home, where it's like they're arguing about screen time because Katie's constantly on this iPad with this forever pet, companion pet. You know, the mother's like, we really need to cut down on her screen time. And the dad's like, I didn't give her the iPad and tell her to play with her toy. Like, that wasn't my decision. And it's like, wow, Jesus Christ. I've had that conversation with my now ex-wife, but my then wife, about like, well, why did you do it then? Like, it's almost like you're talking, like the spouse is actually arguing or talking with herself. You know, it's like, why did I do it? But instead of saying, why did I do that? She said, why did we do this? It's like, well, we didn't do that. You did that. And now I got to act like this was a team effort. That was kind of running through my head through that opening scene. And even through the first scenes with Gemma interacting with Katie, it's like, man, these aren't terribly likable characters. Like, I always feel like, and I've heard this in interviews with actors and writers and producers, it's like, it goes a long way for a movie to be popular and successful when you do have a likable character or a highly sympathetic character. And it's like, even though I kind of identified and related to that argument that the parents are having right before the snowplow accident, that reminds me of how awful my relationship was, or like how awful I was in that moment in my own life. So I was like, oh, like who's going to be, because then they introduced Gemma, and Gemma's like covertly using company resources to build this develop Megan, the child-sized humanoid robot doll. And it's like, she doesn't get fired. And I'm like, God damn it, I've been fired for way less than that. Way less than that I've been fired. Oh boy. Which I guess is a testament to how unlikable I am. That makes sense now. So I was like looking for that likable type, you know, because normally, you know, I think in most movies where you have that tragic passing of a loved one or a parent or a sibling, that kind of that major trauma that one of the protagonists suffers, the trope or the traditional approach would be like you lean on like something that's I guess not romantic, but like emotional. And for them to go, I thought it was interesting that they took that approach with the opening scene, the passing of the parents, where it was like not too likable. It's kind of not a great moment to go out on, you know? So I thought that was interesting. You know, it just holds up a mirror to, in that one scene alone, it holds up a mirror to like, okay, it really sets everything up nicely, because it's like screen time is a major consideration for parents and for childhood development. And, you know, the substitute, and I did this the fucking previous weekend with my daughter, where it's like, I was just exhausted. Rough week. We did end up going to a birthday party, but like the next day, that Sunday was the laziest of Sundays, and it was like nonstop screen time. I mean, luckily she was also doing her sticker book, but it's like, you know, so I do like how they had a lot of great setups and a lot of great payoffs, and they touched on a lot of themes that are just so front of mind, at the forefront for a lot of parents. That's why it was even when Katie's introduced to Gemma, or when Gemma's supposed to be taking on Katie, Gemma has kind of a very like almost detached attitude. And it's just like, your sister just died and this is your niece and this is how you're behaving. It's like, whoa. I thought that was interesting too. But you know, that's kind of stuck in my craw as I'm watching it, you know, kind of like after you eat popcorn, you get the kernel stuck and you're like tonguing at it. That's kind of what was sticking in my head as I'm watching. I'm like, whoa, usually this new legal guardian would make more of an effort at the outset to make this girl feel more at home and blah, blah, but she's so wrapped up in her work and her profession, her career, that her niece, Katie, takes the back seat, is second banana, which is like, and then I'm thinking to myself, oh, like it just started to click. And I was like, I understand why they made this decision with this character. I understand why Allison Williams is doing that, where the direction's coming from, because maybe it seems like she didn't want that life. She's not looking for, I mean, she's on the dating apps, but like, that's where she's at in her development, Like, she's a grown ass adult, probably late 20s, early 30s. But she's not even in a serious relationship. And now she has the, I guess you'd say, quote unquote, burden, but the responsibility, the task of raising this girl who's in her formative years, 8 years old. I mean, she still has, and now has experienced this huge trauma, and Gemma's just completely ill-equipped and unprepared for that. But I was like, when is it gonna click and hit, for her? And I was expecting more of a, like, maybe she's so in shock and numb to it. Sometimes that happens with a really traumatic event that it doesn't initially process, it like does not compute. And then eventually something happens. And so I thought that was going to happen. And it kind of did towards the end, but I was expecting more of an emotional cathartic release. And I don't know that we ever got that, but I think that's more of a reflection of the character. Like, that's just the character. This character has the certain personality where they gravitate more towards relationships with technology than they do with relationships with humans. Because you see how she, not just her relationship with Katie, but Gemma's relationship with other people. She's like, it takes her pretty much the length of the movie to get better at that, because she stinks at it. From her relationship with her neighbor to the way that she handles the therapist. Like, it's just, you're just like, oh man, wrong. You're handling this wrong. And that's coming from someone who sucks at relationships. And I guess that's, part of it is like, I'm just now having this, I mean, I don't want to say like awakening. That sounds so fucking stupid. An epiphany is just overblown. But it's, I'm just realizing that you look back at, because I've had more alone time. And so you start to get in your head and your thoughts, and you think, okay, my 20s, I thought I was this like fun party guy, but maybe I was just a complete and total douche asshole. And I was like laughing about it then, because I was like kind of self-aware, like, oh, I'm an asshole, I'm a douche. But like wasn't doing anything to counteract that or make that not the case. You know what I mean? And then my 30s, like thinking that I like, oh, I'm doing all the right things in terms of finding a girlfriend and all the nice relationship things, and didn't address a lot of the things that needed to be addressed. And I probably could have avoided a lot of what happened. So yeah, coming from me, it's like, oh, hypocrite much? But yeah, the way she went about handling all of that. And to this day, I still do a lot of what Gemma did in that movie, but it's interesting seeing it from an outsider's perspective, looking at it. Like, if I could just separate myself and have that out-of-body experience as things are happening, I could be like, oh, no, don't do that. But in the moment, first person POV, you just don't think that way. So I just thought that struck me as interesting. So ultimately, she ends up trying to make a bit of a more of an effort to, there was that scene where Katie's like first in Gemma's apartment and wants to play with like these toys that are in their boxes on Gemma's shelf. And Gemma's like, no, those are collectibles. You're not allowed to play with those or touch those. And Katie's like, what? I don't get it. Like, I don't understand. And then the scene when the therapist comes over and is like, I want to see you roll this ball. Like, oh, I want to see you interact with Katie. I want to see Gemma interact with Katie, and I want to see you roll this ball back and forth. And Gemma's like, well, it's not a ball, it's a collectible, and da-da-da-da. And she kind of hears herself and is like, okay, this is a little bit absurd, but it's still that part of her that's like, can't let it go. Like, God damn it, this is a collectible. This is not how you use it. This is not right, which I think is natural and inherent for someone that works with technology. Like, based on my personality type, like even though I like drinking and partying and stuff like that, it's like the actual social element of it is I want to entertain people. It's not I want to connect with people, although I do want to connect with people. I think all humans want to connect with people, but for the most part, anyway, this is getting way off the rails. After Katie asks Gemma, like, hey, what's this big ass robot you got just stashed in the corner of your home office? Gemma's like, oh, this is Bruce, and this is how it works. And she has the gloves, like almost like the Nintendo gloves, or the gloves from what was that robot boxing movie with Hugh Jackman? I forget what it's called, but like you have these gloves, and you turn them on, and they can control the arms, the limbs of this giant robot named Bruce. And so that's when they kind of kind of start to connect a little bit and bond. And I was thinking to myself, that's a setup and that's going to have a great payoff. I know it is. And even though I kind of saw the payoff coming, the fact that I saw it coming and still pumped my fist and was like, yes, when it happened, that's a sign of a great movie. When you can pull that off, when an audience, when a swath of the audience knows that that's going to come into play, and it does come into play, and it still clicks and hits and slaps and bangs, whatever the fuck the kids say nowadays. Like, that's a testament to how good this movie is and how Cocaine Bear pales in comparison. And I'm going to continue to compare and contrast because I don't think I did a good job in the Cocaine Bear of showing and indicating why things didn't necessarily land with me. So that's when Gemma's like, all right, I know my boss told me cut it out with this new M3GAN project, but after seeing how my niece interacts with this giant ass, like kind of 1.0 type robot, like I think I should continue working on M3GAN. So she does, and she ends up finishing it with the help of her lab partners, Tess and Cole. And she's able to get it up and running, and she's able to pair it with Katie. So Katie is the kind of like when they say when a child is first born, they typically, the nurse or the doctor will immediately give the baby to the mom and have the baby's skin touch the mother's skin, because that's like pairing mode for for humans. That's the initial bond, physical bond that they have. And it makes sense because my daughter loves her mother. And she's like, Dad, you're all right. You give me food and shelter. So you're okay in my book. I didn't get to do the whole like press my face against her face or have her face touch my skin. The skin to skin contact is what apparently is the, I guess they call it imprinting. It happens with other animals too. Like it happens with, they mention it in some other movies, maybe Jurassic Park, where it's like, oh, this human comes across this baby, whatever, and the mother creature is dead or gone or somewhere else. And so that creature then imprints or bonds with that other being. And that's when M3GAN receives instructions and orders like, hey, your prime directive. We mentioned that there's RoboCop vibes to this. And I think that's why I liked it so much, is because I got RoboCop vibes. But they were like, your prime directive is to serve and protect Katie. So that M3GAN then, you can see where this goes. M3GAN then takes that to a whole nother level and is like, okay, this is a threat. That's a threat. That's a threat. That threat needs to be eliminated because that is a threat. Like that's the kind of binary way that the android thinks. Like, well, that's a threat and we can't have threats. So we got to eliminate the threat. And so that's when she goes on her, slowly but surely she goes on the killing spree. So she kills, you see like the dog. So Katie's shooting the fake arrows in the front yard. And you can see like from M3GAN's point of view, she's like scanning and able to identify certain things like, okay, that's a butterfly, not a threat. Okay, that's a plane flying overhead, not a threat. And although Katie has a bow and arrow, which are weapons, they are toy weapons, and I understand that. And so I'm not viewing her as a threat or a threat to herself. Like she's not going to hurt herself. And then Katie's like, hey, I lost an arrow. Can you find it? And so she looks and she sees the arrow in the hole in the fence and goes to retrieve it. And that's when so we had already seen Gemma get super pissed at her neighbor for the dog coming into her yard and shitting on her driveway and just barking and causing a ruckus. And so, when M3GAN goes to reach through the hole to get the arrow, the dog then bites down, pulls her into the yard. And so that's when M3GAN takes things in her own hands and the dog disappears. And so the neighbor, Celia, comes over and starts accusing Gemma of doing something to the dog. Gemma starts to pick up on like, okay, I'm losing control. Control, where at first it's nice to have an extra set of eyes and hands to attend to Katie. But now, because it frees me up to do more of focus on my career and focus on my work, because I'm not equipped to be this legal guardian parent role model. And so it's nice that she was rattling off statistics and I was like, I guess that would be nice. Like, I hate repeating myself, and I do find myself repeating myself with what I say to my daughter. So it'd be cool to like have something stand in for those moments. She rattled off some stat. It was like 77% of what parents say to their kids are repeated instructions or something like that. I was like, whoa, oh my God, that's the bulk of my relationship with my daughter, is just saying, wash your hands, flush the toilet. It would be nice to have a stand in there so I don't have to repeat myself, because I have this weird thing about repeating myself and also rewatching things. Like I want to make the most of my time here on Earth. And I think if I'm doing something that I've already done before, then it feels like I'm not moving any further in life. Dude, I realize I sound like a fucking maniac. I get it. It's why am I by myself? But then that starts to, like, Katie only responds to M3GAN, right, to the android, and has become so overly attached and grown that she's not listening to Gemma at all and doesn't view her as an authority figure or has any connection with Gemma whatsoever. And so that's when the red flags start to go up for Gemma. She starts to become suspicious, starts to look into this school, because I guess Katie was homeschooled before, when her parents were, before her parents were tragically killed in a car accident, that she was homeschooled. And so she doesn't really have, Gemma thinks, okay, this will help you with your social skills if we send you to a school. It's not a normal school. It's going to be a school that's a little bit different, a little unorthodox, an alternative school where they're outdoors more often. And, it's supposed to be highly regarded or whatever. And so Katie's like, absolutely not. No fucking way. Or can M3GAN come? And Gemma's like, no. Eventually, that scene. I mean, they really nailed what it's like to be a parent, even though Gemma's like historically not a parent. There is that scene where Gemma drops Katie off at the school, and M3GAN's next to Katie, and can M3GAN come? Katie's like, can M3GAN come? And Gemma's like, no. I have to take her into the lab for diagnostics. We got to fix there's something wrong with her. And then the teacher coming up, whatever, the camp counselor or whatever it is, coming up and be like, oh, your friend? And just being like, oh, whoa. Oh, so is that a robot? Like, but then still, after noticing it's a creepy robot, being like, well, we have this toy table, and they could, put the toy on the table. And you can see they put M3GAN like on this toy table next to all these stuffed animals, and she completely sticks out like a sore thumb. Yeah, there's a bully at the school, Brandon. And so Brandon follows Katie out somewhere and starts bullying her. And that's when M3GAN takes things into her own hands. Oh, God. That scene where she kills Brandon, pulls his ear off. Whoa. I was like, but that again, Neal, you're a hypocrite. Like there was ultra violent scenes like that in Cocaine Bear, but you weren't entertained or enjoyed it or whatever. You didn't think it was fun. I mean, this was so clear. Like an ear does not stretch that far. Like I've never seen an ear stretch that far. So the part of it was like, oh my God, ears can do that. Like that's where it differentiates, as opposed to, it's a hand dangling by a ligament. Fucking gross. So yeah, she ends up tearing his ear off. Her running on all fours I remember seeing that in the trailer, because I remember seeing the trailer for this, and I was like, all right, I don't need to see this. This is just another Annabelle or the Conjuring or the Nun, like most of James Wan's work, where it's just like a killer doll. Cool. I remember seeing that in the trailer and being like, all right, yeah, I don't really need to see this movie. That's preposterous. Why would a humanoid doll need to run on all fours? Like, it seems like it's not conducive to running. Like, whatever. I think there was an explanation for it in the movie, and then I also saw it in the trivia, which hopefully I'll get to. But Brandon runs into a road and gets hit by a passing car and dies. So I did. I mean, the scene that precedes that, or is like in conjunction with that, where Gemma and Brandon's mom or stepmom are at the table, like doing something, forget what, preparing lunch maybe. And, the Brandon's stepmother is just glowing about him and just raving about him. And then he's like, oh, shut the fuck up, Diane, or whatever. I do get those vibes when I go to my daughter's daycare, to her school, but also to like birthday parties, where it's like, oh, you have no control over your kid. And I know you're kind of brushing this off and talking like it's not an issue, but this is, I see this becoming an issue. That's always tough. And now also put yourself in that parent's shoes. It's like, you're trying to, I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've looked at my daughter and been like, oh my God, this is going to be such a major issue, and I'm not addressing it, and I'm just hoping to sweep it under the rug. M3GAN eventually, Celia keeps pressing on Gemma and being like, calls the cops and is like, you need to investigate this woman. She obviously hates my dog and has a vendetta, personal vendetta against the dog. Like, she definitely has something to do with it. And now that Gemma was also found at the scene where this kid was hit by a car, it's like the cops start doing the math and connecting the dots, and the red string connects them. So M3GAN notices how Celia poses a threat and takes her out with whatever the fuck. I mean, that was just an interesting death scene. And I think that's what, again, separates it from Cocaine Bear. Because Cocaine Bear is like, he just bites them, rips them apart with his mouth or his claws. The death scenes in M3GAN is like, they just get creative. It's just like Celia's death scene where it's like, I guess that's pesticide. I don't even know what that is. Where it's like, like a bug spray type thing, but like heavy duty pesticide, like DMT type stuff times a million on steroids, where she's spraying Celia in the face and you can see Celia's face melting, throwing a knife and having it stick through her hand to stick it, just like inventive, creative death scenes versus here's just a bear eating people. And I guess you could say like, well, then what do you think about Jaws, Neal? And it's like, well, okay, maybe Cocaine Bear could have been more like Jaws in certain respects, where it's like you don't see part of the mystery and suspense and the thrill of Jaws was that you don't get to see, you only see glimpses or here and there glimpses of the shark, and you don't actually see the attack, but you just see like, I mean, the scene that in Jaws that sticks out to me is like, okay, the shark, you see a swimmer and then the swimmer just fucking gets yanked under the water, and then there's just a cloud of red. It's just like, whoa, what the fuck? And your imagination runs wild. Whereas with the bear, I mean, I'm not going to hound on it, but you get what I'm saying. You get it. At this point, I think M3GAN has presented to David, and David's initially like, what the fuck? Told you to shut it down, but then sees it interacting with Katie and is just like, oh my God. You are able to see the positive applications and benefits of this toy. This companion, because she's able to help Katie process the death of her parents and her feelings. And it's just like, whoa, okay, this is not just your normal run-of-the-mill toy. This is life-changing, culture-changing type stuff on par with like the original iPhone. You know what I'm saying? So David's like, yes, we gotta fast track this because we can't have the competition beating us to the punch, because he, in a previous scene where he discovers that Gemma is working on M3GAN and shuts it down, he's like, have you heard about this whatever rival toy company that has released a Furby-esque type pet companion on par with their Forever Pet or whatever that is like half the price? So that was the initial ask, is like, shut down M3GAN and create the Furby type thing for half the price. It turns out that his assistant, David's assistant, Kurt, is the one who's stealing the files and sending it to a rival, because he's getting paid buku cash to leak those documents and those files, proprietary files. So they plan an unveiling, or like a presentation where they're going to unveil it to the world. At this point, Gemma has become very suspicious of M3GAN and attempts to check her video logs, only to find the files corrupted, deleted, or missing. She brings her to the lab where Tess and Cole attempt to fix her. Katie becomes irrationally angry, which is spot on, because it's like, think about when you were a kid. At least for me, I think there have been instances where as a kid, you're playing a video game and it's like you've probably been playing that video game for way too long, and your mother's been calling for you to come to dinner for way too long, and she's fed up and has had enough, and you're like right in the middle of that tough level with that boss you just can't beat, and you've made such progress and you feel like you're finally about to overcome that obstacle and jump over that hurdle, and then your mom just turns off the video game completely and you haven't been able to save it, and you lose your shit. Definitely, I've had that moment, and I think that's exactly what's happened here, where Katie's becoming attached to M3GAN. M3GAN's been taken away, ripped away from her, and so she freaks out. And then that's when Gemma it finally hits. Finally, this is the moment, right, that we've been waiting for the entire movie, where Gemma finally is able to address the situation at hand and says, she apologizes to Katie and tells her that M3GAN is only a distraction for coping with her loss, not a solution, put more eloquently than that. And I thought that was a pretty powerful moment, powerful scene. And it was pretty cool. So they try to terminate M3GAN, can't do it. M3GAN is now has the ability to like take over other technology. So like, for instance, the cell phone, when Gemma calls Tessa's cell phone, M3GAN is able to pick up silently and impersonate Tessa's voice. And so Gemma's a little like, well, that didn't sound right. And so that's when M3GAN is able to escape. She attacks Cole, almost kills Cole. Tess saves Cole. And Gemma decides to take Katie home and leave the presentation because she's like, I can't go through with this. She's able to create an explosion in the lab. She then, as she's exiting the building, she runs into David. She kills him with like where did she find that sword? It's like some kind of samurai sword. Where did she get that? Like, that's just a creative, inventive death scene. Like, okay, what the fuck? Puts it through his chest as Kurt's in the elevator, and then is able to like confronts Kurt and is like, yeah, I know. She basically just lays it all out. Like, this is how it's going to go down. You were stealing files. Your boss confronted you and said that you were going to be in trouble. So you killed him and then killed yourself. And then she kills Kurt, stages it as a murder suicide. She then steals a sports car, which I thought was interesting. You just see this doll like walking down the stairs to this like such a gorgeous looking sports car, Lamborghini, Bugatti, some kind of hypercar. And drives back to Gemma's house, confronts Gemma. Gemma tries to stop her, disfigures her in the process, and is able to overpower her. But then it looks like, so M3GAN is choking the life out of Gemma, I believe, and is about to kill her. And then that's when Katie comes in with the gloves, the Nintendo gloves, the gloves from that robot boxing movie with Hugh Jackman, and is able to control Bruce. And Bruce, he get it, and is able to tear M3GAN in half. But of course, in all good horror movies, that's just when you think it's over, it's not. M3GAN, their top half remains active, and she attacks Katie, and that's when they're able to expose the processing chip in M3GAN's head, and Katie stabs with a screwdriver, which appears to destroy M3GAN, which is the payoff for the setup that we saw when Bruce was first introduced, and Gemma is like walking Katie through all the various ins and outs mechanisms of Bruce. She opens up the face kind of interface type thing and shows, okay, this is right here is where the processor is. And so Katie's like, oh, that's like the brain. She's like, yeah, it's like the brain. So I thought that was a great callback and a great payoff. And then as Gemma and Katie are leaving the home, Gemma's AI home device, Elsie, turns on by itself and the camera looks toward them. So that's kind of a nice little leaving the door open for a sequel. Oh boy, what a movie. So good. I loved it. I loved it more than I probably should have. I guess and we'll get to the critics, but let's go through the trivia first and then we'll get to the critics. The film was originally shot as an R-rated movie until the producers noticed while editing that was close enough to be PG-13. So they reshot scenes to tone it down, the violence, and thought it would become more effective than actually seeing the violence on screen, a la what we saw in Jaws, but not in Cocaine Bear. Jason Blum cited Drag Me to Hell as a good PG-13 horror film that was effective. And I remember seeing Drag Me to Hell and being thoroughly filled with dread and scared. Their use of sound effects, lighting, shadows, it definitely, oh man, the lady who comes looking for a loan, because that's the main character, the protagonist, works at that kind of company, a bank, I believe. And the old lady who's like kind of a gypsy type looking lady, just like, but has like the one cataract eye and the mole. And it's just like, you're not supposed to judge a book by a cover. I get it. But it was just a scary looking woman. So yeah, Drag Me to Hell was pretty effective. I didn't realize it was PG-13, but yeah, it makes sense. So I did not see the PG-13 movie. I saw this was the unrated version of the movie. And so maybe that's why my opinion is so high, because like it did, even though it was unrated and that gives them free license to like do whatever the fuck they want, they didn't go like crazy over the top with it. And it was like the scenes that did have those that could be considered ultra graphic or violent or gory wasn't to the point of like, oh, this is just, whatever. The song M3GAN plays on the piano is Toy Soldiers, which I thought was a great choice because I think she probably views herself as a toy soldier. The idea of the film began when James Wan's Atomic Monster Productions was brainstorming story ideas and chose one about Killer Doll. Although Wan produced Annabelle, which is about a killer doll. Pretty much the concept is about embracing technology too much and relying too much on it, and what happens when technology runs amok. It's commentary on the world we live in, and it feels relevant. And I'd say, yeah, dude, you nailed it. Jason Blum stated the film would have black comedy elements, which is one reason Gerard Johnstone was chosen to direct, saying we needed someone who can do the thrills and set pieces, but can also has a cheeky approach. And I guess Johnstone's film Housebound, which I've never heard of, balances that horror and comedy elements by creating tones that is frightening and humorous, which they nailed on both fronts. A technician uses a pen to track Megan's eye movement. The way the scene is presented through Megan's POV is very similar to the montage scene where Officer Murphy is reconstructed in 1987's RoboCop. And this is the other movie that, and I guess this is why the critics that panned it or that had negative reviews, they use the word derivative, which I guess when you're a movie critic and you're seeing every movie that ever releases, that can weigh on you. And you're like, this is derivative. I've seen this before. I've seen this before. I've seen this before. But it's not, I don't know. They treat derivative like it has a negative connotation and they view it as a negative thing. But I think there's a fine line. And I know when I'm working on a screenplay right now, and it's like I am heavily leaning on past influences of mine, but also influences that I think would be appropriate for the character, right? Like the character likes this type of music. The character likes this type of movie. The character enjoys whatever. And you can't help like making those connections, right? I like making abstract connections between things that seemingly are unrelated, but like they've constructed Megan. It's hard not to think about, okay, this reminds me of that scene in RoboCop, and then to have that scene in the movie without turning to the camera and being like, remember RoboCop? Like I think that's fine, dude. I like it. I personally like it, as long as it's not like too shot for shot, I guess. And then it starts to feel like a knockoff parody type thing, spoof. Several sequences make references and homages to Child's Play. So this is another movie that I did not reference in my review, but yeah, it makes total sense. I never saw Child's Play, but that is like one of the crazier things to me is I do remember as a kid, I was 7 or 8 when Child's Play came out, seeing the commercials on TV or seeing appearances because they would have the doll appear on, certain TV shows or movies or whatever as like promotions for the movie, and having so many nightmares about that fucking Chucky doll. So many goddamn nightmares when I was a kid. Never saw the movie. Kudos to the creators of that doll and that movie because you have permanently infected my brain. Anyway, in terms of Megan, several of the focus shots on Katie are inspired by frames of Andy in some scenes from Child's Play, which I get that. You do look at Megan's face and you're like, and I was like, where have I seen this before? And it's like, yep, it's Chucky from Child's Play. Even the battle between Gemma and Megan is inspired by the final climax of Child's Play where Karen Barclay confronts Chucky. Okay, well, there you go. So maybe that's why the critics are so harsh on this. 'Cause it's like, yeah, we saw this before, 30 years ago. Megan drops to all fours to chase Brandon. Okay, so this is what I was mentioning before. Megan drops to all fours to chase Brandon down, likely because of how replicating bipedal movement at high speed is still a problem for real-world robotics scientists. Like to me, having read that makes that scene that much better. Because you watch it not knowing that. Like when I saw it in the trailer and not knowing that, I was like, oh, that's just like, that seems unnecessary. And then you see it, and then I saw the movie and I was like, because at that point in the movie, I was already sold on this being a good movie to a great movie. I was like, okay, I kind of like the choice here because she's a predator and, she views herself as an apex predator. And so she is the cocaine bear. Oh boy. But knowing now that that's because it's, it's just an issue for the scientists that created it. It's like, oh, that makes that scene even better. Kurt had been stealing secrets from the company, as we mentioned, and was likely the reason for Funky's rivals' ability to produce cheaper knockoffs. Basically, they're saying here that is another kind of subtle hint that there's going to be this story isn't done because we saw him copying the files, moving it to his desktop, and that's when David caught him and was like, "Are you looking at porn again?" It's like, "No." Like, okay, that is one thing I think that maybe they could have. I don't think they fully were able to get the most comedic juice squeezed out of Ronnie Chang. Like he's like one of the premier stand-up comedians, and I think he brought a nice campy, cheeky, comedic angle bent to his character. It's just like that's one, and it's such a minor knock. It's just like I would have liked to see him do more with the character, I think, in a funny way that didn't feel generic. Kurt you see him stealing the files and copying to his desktop, so he probably has already, before he dies, has probably already sold those to a rival company, and so they're gonna start making Legion or M3GAN knockoffs, and then all hell breaks loose. So you can start to see how this is like about to go. Cry. LC2. I mean, that was the other one that we mentioned towards the end of the plot recap. Like, oh, so this M3GAN's now just like in a bunch of technology. Oh boy. And sure enough, yeah, it's getting a sequel. So if you were in suspense, like, oh my God, it's gonna get a sequel. Yeah, it's got a release date of January 17th, 2025, with the title revealed to be M3GAN 2.0. Will be written by Cooper, with Williams and McGraw returning as Gemma and Katie, respectively. So what did the critics say? I'm so glad that you've got that on your mind. On Metacritic, weighted average is 72 out of 100, with generally favorable reviews. Cinema Score gave it a B. I would go so far as the B plus A minus. I don't know. I mean, maybe it's because I haven't seen Child's Play, but I have seen RoboCop. Maybe if I have seen Child's Play, I'd be like, oh, Jesus Christ, this is a direct like ripoff of Child's Play. But I don't know. A B plus A minus is where I would go with that. And then Post Track gave it 3.5 out of 5 stars, which I feel is a little low. 93% of all critics on Rotten Tomatoes gave it favorable reviews, with an average rating of 7.2 out of 10. 95% of top critics gave it a favorable review, which is interesting. It's usually not higher than all critics, with an average rating of 7.2 out of 10. I would say I think I went higher than that. I gave it an 8 out of 10. I gave it an 8 out of 10 on IMDb, which I think it's like a 7.4 on IMDb or something like that. So as time goes on, I might bring that down to like a high 7. But yeah, I usually when I do give it a movie an 8, I say 8 and then I like think about it for 5-10 seconds and then I kind of change it to a 7. Because again, IMDb doesn't give you the ability to do like decimals. So I think if I were to do decimals, it would be like I rounded it to an 8, like a 7. I'd say 7.8. The critics' consensus: unapologetically silly and all the more entertaining for it, M3GAN is the rare horror comedy that delivers chuckles as effortlessly as chills. Fucking A, dude. Spot on. And it's what Cocaine Bear should have been. I know I'm shitting on Cocaine Bear a lot, but goddamn, if you're gonna give that kind of positive buzz to it, gotta back it up. The Independent's Clarice Lowry gave the film a score of 4 out of 5 stars, writing that it feels exactly like watching Mean Girls Queen Bee Regina George if someone had given her a knife and a death wish. Thought that was a good visual. dadofcron.com often says it often works like gangbusters as an over-the-top horror comedy whose fun rests on a toy box full of priceless leering doll reaction shots and cutting remarks. Yep. And that's something that you couldn't do in Cocaine Bear. I don't think. It's a bear. I think that that was what had to have been the major challenge, because it's like how many, and I thought maybe we were getting more of that for some reason. Like you see the bear take it with its paw and then rub it on its teeth. Just something that's more human-esque in its behavior. They did show, I guess, yeah, I can't do too much on Cocaine Bear. Dear God. This was interesting. M3GAN has been described as a gay icon or a queer icon. Eric Piepenberg of the New York Times described M3GAN as being, quote, the gorgeous and loyal but messy and insolent woman, the type of women gay men are protective of, end quote. It was like, okay, I guess I kind of can see that. Very interesting. Yeah, her outfits are very like, the outfit choice was interesting. Because I guess they wanted to make it look like a doll and not too much like a human child, which makes sense. But at the same time, it does look like something that like a woman who's like strung out on prescription pills would, kind of like Sherry O'Terry's character from Saturday Night Live to that degree, like just a hot mess. What does the audience say? The audience says, as long as you aren't looking for something truly scary or even surprising, M3GAN is often a lot of fun. Okay. Were there a lot of surprises? No. I mean, they did. I feel like they kind of forced a jump scare on us early in the film with the dog. It wasn't too forced, but it was like they didn't, but they also didn't try to like lean on the jump scares too much, which I appreciate. And was it truly scary or even surprising? So I guess this is like, again, we keep comparing it to Cocaine Bear, but This was, I feel like, more campy, cheeky comedy than it was horror, right? And so if you are a true horror fan, you might not like this over Cocaine Bear. And maybe you like Cocaine Bear because of the graphic nature of the horror elements there, not so much the comedy. You know, that's, I guess, the spectrum of horror comedies, you know. And I appreciate movies like M3GAN more because of its clever, subtle use of the comedy within the horror, as opposed to like we're gonna go over the top with like the graphic nature of it, but it's being too reality based as opposed to absurd. I don't know. 78% of the verified audience members on Rotten Tomatoes gave it a favorable review with an average rating of 4 out of 5, while all audience members, 74% of all audience gave it an average rating of 3.9 out of 5. So yeah, I guess I would give it a 4 out of 5, if not a 3.9. Either one of those, basically, just round up to 4. All right, so that's M3GAN.